Hello one and hello all, welcome to another Media Moogle review. I am Old Gamer Joe, today taking a look at The Flower Collectors, a detective noir indie adventure game from Mipumi Games. It is available on Steam as of April 21st of this year 2020, and in this game you take control of the character who is bound to his wheelchair named Jorge, a former cop. One night while going through his regular old routine, he hears a gunshot right outside of his window, and being a former cop, his natural instinct is to try and investigate the situation, so he grabs his binoculars and tries to scope things out the best he can. Lucky for him, however, he gets a visitor in the middle of the night, Melinda, and the two form a partnership in which she kind of acts as his leg, seeing he can't really leave his apartment or explore much due to his disability. So similar to Firewatch, which the developer does mention that this game was inspired a bit by, the two will communicate throughout the game through a walkie-talkie device and try to get to the bottom of this mystery and figure out who exactly is responsible for shooting this poor victim. While the opening chapters do start out a bit slow, I found myself progressively getting more and more invested in both the characters and the setting of this game. There aren't a lot of different areas. In fact, there's really only your apartment and then the deck to look out into a small sector of the city. So the game does do a pretty good job of making you feel like you are in the main character's shoes, not being able to utilize your legs and being forced to kind of try to pick and choose your battles and solve the mystery the best you can from a distance and relying on your partner. Without giving away too much, you will learn more and more about the main character and the other characters in this world as well, and the storyline definitely stands out as the strong point of this game, with some pretty solid voice acting across the board. Unfortunately, it's the moment-to-moment gameplay in The Flower Collectors, however, that really fails to deliver. While your tasks are pretty well laid out in front of you and you'll always have a good idea of where you should be looking, the main idea is that you have to examine situations through your binoculars or by snapping photos through a camera, which Melinda gives you. You'll use either of those devices to zoom in on characters or situations that look a little bit suspicious and pertain to the murder. Once you have discovered and highlighted the area of importance, you'll typically be greeted with a white exclamation point. You'll just have to hover over that area for a little bit longer, and then the dialogue between Melinda and that character will take over from there. Usually with her approaching a specific subject or area and just exploring it a bit further. And that's more or less the bulk of the gameplay in this title. There are a few other things that can be done, such as poking around your apartment to find certain objects that will help advance the story, and then at the end of certain days you'll find the clues that you've discovered throughout the game scattered amongst your apartment, and you can kind of piece them together on a board to put them in the correct order and lead you to the answers. The solutions to these are always really obvious and really don't even qualify as puzzles in my opinion, because it's so simple to figure out the order of which these pictures go in that you've taken throughout the day. It's really more of a distraction and a way to further progress the overall storyline. And while I was enjoying the storyline and did want to see how everything kind of shaped out, I did find that the gameplay got very tedious rather quickly, and I never felt too challenged or engaged with the gameplay loop. It was just kind of the same thing over and over again, and to be honest with you, it gets rather boring. I do think this concept of being placed into the main character's shoes and having to deal with his limitations is interesting, but it really doesn't make for a fun gameplay experience. I think it could have been a really cool idea if the game had shifted perspectives to Melinda from time to time and allowed you to take control of her, because she finds herself in some precarious situations that would have been fun from a gameplay standpoint. But I do understand what the developer was going for, and despite the fact that Jorge does have his physical limitations, he's still really helpful and useful from a distance in terms of having knowledge. I should also mention that the storyline of The Flower Collectors does get a little heavy-handed and features a lot of politics, so if that's a turnoff for you in games, this certainly won't change your mind. Themes of the left versus the right are pretty heavily scattered across the storyline, which will take you about 4 hours to complete. And even delving into such topics as police brutality, this is not a game that shies away from these deep topics of discussion. Now, if you've followed Media Moogle for a while now, you know that I am not easily offended by such things, but I know there are folks out there that don't really like politics in their video games. In cases where you don't like that kind of thing, then The Flower Collectors will definitely not be for you. I would say the graphics in the Flower Collectors are merely okay. They're pretty rudimentary in terms of 3D graphic design. There aren't a lot of settings like I mentioned earlier, and that's also true for the actual PC settings. You can really only mess around with the resolution and not change much else. I can't believe I've also gotten this far into the review and not mentioned the fact that everyone in this game is resembled by an animal or seems to have the features of an animal. Kinda sorta similar to what you found in The Wolf Among Us if you're familiar with that game, but rather than being based on fable characters, they just seem to be non-defined dogs or other types of animals. Unfortunately, some really shoddy animation work doesn't help to bring these characters to life or help their personalities in any meaningful way. All of the character actions felt really pre-scripted and non-believable. Thankfully though, as I had touched on, the voice acting for the most part is pretty commendable and I did enjoy most of the performances that I came across.
I manage.
Thanks for letting me stay here.
Didn't have much of a choice.
Well, no one else answered their door.
The soundtrack's actually not half bad either and does creep up on you at the right moments. I enjoyed the percussion particularly, which is quite powerful on some of the tracks. But at the end of the day, this is a game that you're going to want to play for the storyline and not much else. So if the story is not something that speaks to you, you're going to want to check out pretty quickly, I feel like. But if you do get invested in a pretty decent detective tale, you will get a satisfying enough conclusion, and there are a few different choices that can be made throughout the game that will affect things a bit differently, and that includes the ability to unlock some other story paths that help you get all of the achievements. It's a shame in some ways really, because the storyline of the Flower Collectors is engaging enough to entertain throughout, but the gameplay really isn't. For more on the Flower Collectors and all of our other content, head on over to MediaMoogle.net where we have some great podcasts. And if you have enjoyed our video content today, please do hit the subscribe button below. Thank you so much for watching.